For many, childhood memories are imbued with that magical essence of carefree innocence, the warmth of a mother's touch, the comforting reassurance of a father's encouragement. Though life still has its ups and downs, through the consistent assurance that you are loved, you are safe, and you are wanted, all the wounds of life can be healed or used to further grow and nourish the person you slowly transform into. At your core, a stable, self-sufficient, full person with their own wants, needs, and wishes. For others, childhood is a cold, dark basement, haunted by the cobwebbed rot of a distant past, a spiny amalgamation of memories and pains that may not all belong to you. In place of the mother's loving touch and the father's assuring presence, a fragmented mess of clues are strewn amongst trash and rubble, almost indistinguishable from one another. The desperate isolation and loneliness only serving to further alienate you as weird, difficult, or simply other in the eyes of your peers. What happens when a child's desire for love and connection grows so desperately ravenous that they would do anything for even the faintest reflection of tenderness? This is the story of Adrienne in Yame's nightmarish masterpiece of surreal horror, Growing My Grandpa. Growing My Grandpa is a point-and-click exploration game with two possible endings. The story takes place over a period of 5 weeks, in which we perceive events through the eyes of two people: the documentations of a concerned school counsellor and the little girl at the heart of everything, Adrienne. Deeply introverted, shy, and troubled, Adrienne finds herself unfazed by the litany of demerits and disapproval she has been subject to at school. Preferring to receive such punishments rather than face the dread of interacting with other students during group projects, her withdrawn and anxiously quiet nature has not gone unnoticed, having culminated in sessions of weekly check-ins with this counsellor. Week 1 begins with their thoughts about Adrienne thus far. Having recently moved to the area and joined the school, the usual struggles of trying to settle into a new environment as well as a new home seem to be just the tip of the iceberg, as the counsellor notes her turbulent home life with 2 cold and unloving parents who seem ill-equipped to nurture her in the way a child her age needs. Aware of the stunting effect such treatment has on a young, developing mind, the counsellor makes a decision that will greatly impact the story of the game: to coax Adrienne out of the cage of her own mind by using make-believe, to nurture her vivid imagination and use the resulting abstract thinking to encourage her to explore and process her inner world. This is when Adrienne, in her small, stuttering voice, starts to open up about the basement. Adrienne likes the basement. At first, being sent to clean the dark and filthy space below the house seemed to be a reactive punishment for trying to intervene in her parents' arguments, but on exploring the strange and fascinating items of the past, she grew a liking to being down there. She found many strange but cool things, and even something living, sort of. The counsellor, processing her words through the lens of fantasy and make-believe they chose to view it through, encourages her to share more of this symbolic exploration of the basement of her mind, documenting the story as we begin to relive it through Adrienne's eyes. Beneath debris, a layer of trash bags, and a lining of inward-facing mirrors, we, through Adrienne's eyes, find the sort of living thing that she spoke of. Something like an animal, a mass of black undulating needles growing larger in response to her gaze. Terror turned to curiosity as she observed the bristles reaching out towards her. The counsellor immediately shifts focus to other objects in the room, trying to find meaning outside of this otherworldly animal that they categorise as something entirely fantastical and unreal. Thus begins the duality of the player's experience across the game's 5 acts. Actively reliving Adrienne's experience of the basement with unnerving immediacy, only to be repeatedly and jarringly torn back into the counsellor's distant, clinical framing of the events we witnessed at the start of each week. Every week we relive Adrienne's descent into the basement, clearing away perpetually reappearing piles of regenerative trash. The task is monotonous and seemingly unending, adding to the feeling of surrealness as one has to wonder how these neglected drawers and crevices keep filling with pieces of crumpled paper, revealing different items hidden amongst the discarded masses every time Adrienne looks there. The fact a player must individually grab and place every last piece into the bin really immerses you in Adrienne's reality. We are really here doing this, uncovering these secrets all alone. Stranger still are the items she finds: scientific research notes, fragmented clues about her grandfather's history, hand-bound books on magic and religion, and detailed documents of freakish supernatural experiments. Upon discovering that this basement was filled with relics from her grandfather's past, the action of sending her down here to rummage through the dark, to separate the trash and decay from the useful or informational, felt like more than a simple punishment or a way to dismiss or avoid dealing with their child's feelings. In a broken household, the child may try to make sense of a past they were not there for, one they cannot comprehend, in an attempt to parent their parents. This parentification is soon taken into the literal as well, as Adrienne pieces together some of the clues found during this first week and embarks on her pivotal mission: to reach out to her grandfather in the hopes that he might be able to help her fix her parents. There is but one small predicament. He is dead. This new home Adrienne's family moved into was indeed once his, but it was inherited by her mother some time after his death. Still, allowing her curiosity to guide her, inside a hidden passage, Adrienne finds what she describes as a magic book, a magic doll, some magic glue, and a photograph of her deceased grandfather. On reading the magic book, we discover that it is a dissertation written by her grandfather, Dr. Jacob Hart, an accomplished scientist, which explains all the research notes scattered around the basement. The paper documents historical entities of the magical and mystical, merging folklore and myth with science and the evolution of human understanding of strange phenomena, in particular focusing on well-documented accounts of a demon known as the Heaven of Needles, or the Angel of Needles. There is a lot going on here, and it is written in quite a complex scientific language, so I want to hopefully break it down into a more digestible form to help us better understand just what happens next. In describing the subject of his research as a nexus of magico-religious meaning-making, sorcery regarding human-related desires, and the history and science of neurological disorders related to the fusiform gyrus, Dr. Hart is essentially seeking to link mystical belief, human desire, and brain function through his work. The fusiform gyrus is a region of the brain associated with facial recognition and social-emotional processing, something he mentions explicitly earlier in the paper regarding the Angel of Needles as well, making the idea of facial recognition particularly important to keep in mind. It seems that Dr. Hart is suggesting that experiences that have been interpreted as divine or supernatural may instead be as a result of individual perception rather than something demonic or otherworldly. For example, the culture and religion of the time and place might influence how someone perceives a natural or explainable occurrence. Equally, a neurodivergent or atypical brain would shape a different response to a typical one, and therefore should not be expected to have the same perceptions or be treated as such. His desire to analyse the historical sources of those encounters and go into the neurology of mystic and magico-religious experiences suggests he views folkloric explanations not as fantasy, but as individually shaped responses to genuine psychological experiences. He does not entirely dismiss magic, however. Instead, Hart notes his ongoing correspondence with a folklorist and keeper of traditions, acknowledging that though these might be neurologically rooted experiences, the ritual systems and beliefs that have been passed through generations in response to them should not be dismissed. This dissertation firmly places the Angel of Needles in the centre of a Venn diagram which intersects biology, belief, and inherited behaviour, reinforcing the idea that both neurodivergence and generational trauma influence our understanding of our own struggles, how they are externalized and acted upon. I found this to be an extremely interesting direction for the game's narrative, particularly given the meeting of the two worlds of the counsellor's more clinical view and Adrienne's more magical. The counsellor meets Adrienne's magical findings of the book, doll, glue, and photo with the clinical question of, what is their purpose? Adrienne's response is simple yet otherworldly. Grow, Grandpa. The counsellor, then needing something more grounded in sense, asks her to elaborate, to which Adrienne draws from what she has learned from the research notes. Grandpa lives in a cage in the other room, the cage behind the door. They grew people in the cage. Approaching the door back by the strange creature, we can now find a hastily written note. In it, a clearly distressed Dr. Hart writes in an anxious, urgent manner, a final note to his colleagues and assistants outlining an unexpected and dire end to the research they had been conducting in this very basement, behind this very door, one he now urges the reader to never open. Adrienne's grandfather explains that on this final day of his work, he found a fellow researcher, William, severely concussed and unresponsive. He goes on to say that Whiskers was nowhere to be found, which is later confirmed to have been the name given to this needly mass. He also uses the label of anthropoidic void, hinting at its potential to take on a more human shape. He explains to the reader that he attempted to seal away this creature to the best of his ability on such short notice by the use of mirrors, suggesting it may be controlled or weakened somehow by reflective surfaces, and essentially he locked down the basement and entire house as effectively as he could before fleeing the scene, hiding their research and all documentation of what they had been doing with this creature, fearing the evidence of their work to be a professional or even criminal liability. Most chilling of all are his words on William. Dr. Hart is adamant that the reader does not try to help or save him, and to not be fooled into doing so, even stating that him being alive is simply a means of predation on the remaining researchers, insinuating that he is in a state beyond saving, but could be in some way used to cause even further harm, and that is something to be wary of. Finally, he mentions finding several photos of William's deceased sister on his catatonic body, implying that this put him at some kind of risk, but not yet explaining why. Ignoring the note, a powerful demonstration of her determination, Adrienne ventures forth through the door, finding the room with the cage, concealed by another layer of inward-facing mirrors. Removing the cloak of tarp and glass, she begins her magical ritual. Combining the doll, glue, and photo, an avatar of her desire is born, a symbol of her intention, imbued with a deep and desperate wish for her grandpa to return, to make her parents love her in the way that she needs. Adrienne is unsure of her actions, not confident that she is doing it correctly, simply spurred on by her burning desire, a reality that once again reflects that of a helpless child in her situation. Her wish is heard. Beneath the doll's burlap skin, the follicles knit together what resembles a proper person. Your grandpa. The following weeks will see Adrienne continuing her monotonous task of clearing endless trash, uncovering documents and clues about her grandfather's past, and will now also include doing just what this game says on the tin, growing her precious grandpa, of course. Alongside documents detailing Dr. Hart's work, we now begin to find items explicitly meant to aid in Grandpa's growth. Adrienne can now gain knowledge from what she reads, which unlocks topics of conversation she can open up with Grandpa, as well as vocabulary cards with which she can teach him how to formulate certain words. And finally, food items, some more edible than others, with the less digestible of delicacies needing to be concealed inside soft foods such as fruit and vegetables. You are in charge of its cognitive development and diet until it is able to sustain itself. The more that Adrienne observes and fulfills Grandpa's needs, the more open he becomes to speak with her about topics of her own choosing, parting his knitted skin and revealing the uncanny, fetal-like being growing within. Adrienne can ask him about a variety of topics, some personal to her such as her wish, and some related to this new grandpa himself, such as asking him about his shell. Though she can ask him about the same topics again every week, leading to more fleshed out responses, Grandpa begins at a significantly underdeveloped physical and cognitive ability, meaning his answers are often cryptic, disjointed, and at times unintelligible and seemingly nonsensical.
The air behind your eyes. I can taste it.
Despite this, it is still clear from the very first week of his gestation he understands what is being asked of him, as when Adrienne asks him about her wish, he says,
Mother, Father, new lives out of the air.
This reference to air creating new lives, or the air behind her eyes, will become important later, but for now just felt like a particular way to express something like space or potential. And his specific referencing of her mother and father shows that he understands her wish involves helping them and not only bringing her grandfather back. It becomes clear that there is some sort of contractual give and take in this relationship. Adrienne must raise her grandfather to maturity, and in exchange, he will grant her heart's desire. As much as Adrienne is a child wishing for someone to nurture her to self-sufficiency, she too becomes mother to this creature in much the same way. This is where the idea of child parentification develops beyond clues in the narrative and becomes a core gameplay mechanic. This bleeds far outside the realm of a creepy pet simulator or a Tamagotchi-esque experience due to the promise of something in return, something beyond the satisfaction of completing a list of weekly goals. Adrienne is not merely caring for a companion, she is attempting to manufacture a world for herself that feels bearable or even inviting. Whiskers, maturing now within its shell, chosen and sealed with the focused intention and desperate wish of this young girl, begins on its journey to embody not only the physical likeness of Dr. Hart, but a mimic of what a loving grandfather would mean to Adrienne. Multiple notes and documents found around the basement allude to Whiskers' ability to replicate, especially using the memories, faces, and thoughts within someone's mind. seeming to prey upon deep human desires such as love, connection, and a sense of belonging. What could be more appealing to an isolated child starved for love? Equally, what better way for a creature to assure it receives love and care than to mimic something or someone you already have an emotional bond with, or to promise an actionable solution to the complications of life. This behaviour is referenced and warned about ad nauseum throughout many documents. However, it seems not to deter Adrienne whatsoever towards bonding with her grandpa. Quite the opposite, in fact, as by the second week, the counsellor and school staff alike increasingly note her seeming to be happier and more confident, leading them to question their initial thoughts about pathologising her as being disturbed. Though her tendency to become upset and withdrawn again at the topic of her home life stops that thought short. In week 3, she gushes to the counsellor about how much cooler Grandpa is than her parents, which really shows the depth of her tragic situation. This struck me especially hard during the new wish dialogue during week 3.
Hunger is not enough. On the walls of the cave the aura can be hunger transformed. Desire is fulfilled by pain. Your grandpa doesn't have the right words right now. I can only say, I love you. Love is not enough though. Desire is not enough. Project it outwards. Make it true to yourself. If only in symbol, then it will be enough. For me, and for you.
When Whiskers, speaking as her grandpa, expresses to Adrienne that hunger is not enough and desire is fulfilled by pain, it is not only meant to be an unnerving, cryptic moment for the player. It is reinforcing this core idea seen repeatedly through each layer of the story, that wishing can only become real when performed through action, ritual, and cost. Physical and psychological cost. His assertion that hunger can be transformed on the walls of the cave of Auroch, a reference to prehistoric cave paintings, again points towards the ancient human need for symbol and ritual, and the innate impulse to give suffering meaning through creation. Through these inherited rituals and beliefs, human suffering is given structure and meaning, often passed down through generations as a way of making the unbearable feel controlled or purposeful. Wanting, wishing, those alone change nothing. Quite aside from the numerous clues that point to Whiskers' mirroring nature, this logic is already clearly born from Adrienne's deepest hopes and desires to be able to change her parents, experience love, and control her fate. When a child inevitably finds they have no agency or control in their family, one in which they feel completely helpless, being presented with something actionable feels hard to resist. What does she have to lose? Trauma teaches children that feelings and desires are simply inefficient, love is not enough, and that the warmth and nurturing she longs for must be earned through endurance, self-sacrifice, and never given freely. Whiskers' words simply reinforce a system that Adrienne is already part of. Because Whiskers, this angel of needles, is a mimic, sapping inspiration from Adrienne's own desires, his words do not feel discomforting to her. They reflect her actual experience back to her in a way that I imagine resonates with her deeply. And rather than telling her she is broken, disturbed, or helpless to change her parents, he offers an exchange that feels less terrifying than what she already lives with. His offer of change is going to come with a sacrifice, but Adrienne's understanding of love, family, and acceptance is already utterly entangled with pain, fruitless efforts, and a sense of responsibility. This cosmic exchange of a child's wish for a monster's satiation is disturbing on a surface level because of its predatory imbalance, But the true horror of it resides in the fact that this exchange makes sense in the logic of a neglected child. When Adrienne has already been crushed, stunted, and shrunk down into a shell of what she could have been, what loss is a dark pact if it promises to make things better in the end? More notes document Whiskers' history before life in Dr. Hart's lab, how it was itself passed down through generations in a ritualistic manner, kept in a demon trap where it was buried in a bowl, upside down and covered in incantations to keep it at bay. Whiskers' keeper at the time instructed Dr. Hart to shield himself with a covering lined with mirrors, and to feed the creature whatever it will eat in order to keep it content. The act of feeding being explained as a sort of ritualized dependency rather than for nutrition. The keeper is sure to add, however, that any sort of flesh should be strictly avoided, as the taking in of flesh is another act entirely. This will become very important later. It seems that cutting Whiskers off from any human or organic input and keeping it minimally sated by these symbolic feedings has been the way to control this entity historically. Considering its method of survival involves engaging with human desire and mimicking, this makes sense, as only allowing it to reflect itself would essentially lock it into an exhausting, empty feedback loop and starve it of material to use. The mirrors themselves may also block or significantly weaken its ability to read minds. Many accounts of how to approach or interact with Whiskers involve blocking its access to input by wearing mirrors or leaving it with only its own reflection for prolonged periods of time until it is subdued and malleable. The researchers document their typical protocol towards dealing with Whiskers' life cycle, with Dr. Hart being absolutely adamant that it is never allowed to reach full maturity, instead being studied and tested thoroughly before being incapacitated and then ultimately incinerated before it reaches 5 weeks of growth. Dr. Hart expresses his hesitance and fears surrounding exposing Whiskers to human input long term, as well as his stance on assuring that, along with disallowing its maturity, it never ends up too human-like, as this would make it the ultimate predator, able to fool and manipulate with ease. There is even a note from William urging strict adherence to these protocols, which is a little ironic now when piecing together what might have happened to him, considering he was carrying photos of his sister at the time Dr. Hart discovered his unresponsive body. After teaching Whiskers how to say the word grandpa, we even discover a log of an experiment on the back of the vocabulary card, where during an exercise in which William played a brother character and Whiskers played a sister character, William noted that Whiskers could draw upon actual memories of his late sister. Perhaps this was one of the many incidents that drove William's desire towards engaging in a contract with Whiskers that ultimately went awry. Incinerating Whiskers supposedly resets the creature back to a sort of nucleus state, in which it should not have retained any memory of its previous iterations, disallowing it from developing a theory of mind or building on any previous development. Essentially, researchers first believed the incineration to be creating a blank slate, unarmed by past knowledge or even the understanding that it has ever been alive before. This was most definitely questioned and subsequently disproven, however, as the researchers began to realize that despite being destroyed over and over, Whiskers' physical regenerative abilities could indeed extend to regenerating memory and knowledge from previous lives as well.
Grandpa is old. My lives were easier before I made myself to speak and before you made clothes to wear and rules to obey. Your grandpa remembers. I have learned much in many lives and deaths.
We can see this in how he communicates with Adrienne over the weeks too. His development is rather rapid, as Adrienne fully exposes herself to him with no reflective veil or protection at all, giving him everything he wants, needs, and desires, with the sole purpose of making him as human and capable as possible, both to fulfill the contract, but also because Adrienne truly believes this is the way to fix her parents' relationship, and by extension, her life. Something important to remember as well is that though Whiskers is capable of mimicry, able to replicate the physical form and behaviours of a being, it also seems to understand how to coalesce memory and fact with desire, creating this grandpa that may not even be anything close to an accurate representation of the real Dr. Hart. By creating something through the complex tangle of memory, hope, imagination, and desire, it is creating an idealized version of what a grandpa means to Adrienne. A knowledgeable, warm, honest, and kind elder who would know just what to do in a crisis. Who better to parent her parents than, well, her mother's actual parent? We do not know how loving or involved Dr. Hart was in Adrienne's life when he was alive, though we can infer through environmental and story clues, as well as our baseline understandings that all humans are flawed, that Dr. Hart was not what we see represented here by Whiskers. For starters, Dr. Hart was clearly deeply invested in his work. Even before these extensive experiments, on which he would have had to spend an inordinate amount of time, his interest in different cultures has taken him on what I would presume to be multiple, prolonged trips. I highly doubt that his journey securing Whiskers is the first of these research expeditions. I mean, that whole journey alone would likely have been months, if not years, in the making of travelling, investigation, making connections, and building relationships. This sort of work does not leave much time or emotional energy for tending to a blossoming family, especially one with a lonely young child whose parents clearly needed some guidance and support. That is our first strong indication that Dr. Hart may not have been a very involved grandparent, or even parent. Being married to work can have a devastating impact on families, though of course it doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't loving and warm when he was around. However, some further digging certainly set off some alarm bells for me. As previously touched on, one core rule of these studies was to be extremely cautious about exposing Whiskers to information that could be used to manipulate. Photographs of loved ones seeming to be one particularly powerful tool for the creature, as Dr. Hart noted the risk William took by carrying the photos of his sister. We also find a photograph of Adrienne's mother, Dr. Hart's child, as well as what looks to possibly be a photo of a young Dr. Hart holding Adrienne's mother as a baby, both locked away out of sight in a safe. What stands out to me about this is that there is no photo of Adrienne, which actually made me wonder if Dr. Hart had ever even met her. Just a quick note from the edit, I did realise that this picture could potentially be a baby Adrienne, especially since the building or the home/research laboratory that she's now living in was left for years between her grandpa's death and when Adrienne's mother inherited it. It's so hard to tell the age of the man in the picture, or if that little collection of pixels is actually a baby, that I believe it may be. But either way, we can sort of infer that because he doesn't have a recent image or, an older image of Adrienne in there, because she appears to be probably around 12. It has possibly been multiple years since he has seen her, or perhaps he only met her when she was born. Difficult to say, but it still just strikes me that there isn't an image of Adrienne in here as a child, and not an infant. You can come across a photo of Adrienne's father as a young man, however, it isn't safely stashed away with the other photos. Instead, his picture can be found in the hazardous waste bin of all places, where parts of Whiskers' dying body would be discarded after incinerations. Asking Whiskers about this prompts it to tell us.
His daughter had given him a photo of her new boyfriend. He threw it into the bin in disgust and joked with one of his colleagues.
This small comment just told me so much about Dr. Hart. Whether his mockery and dismissal was born from something innately cruel, or whether he was just so immersed in his work that he became distanced from how his actions might make his daughter feel, no matter the intention, this act is part of a thread that connects the pain and dysfunction of Adrienne's life further back than her parents. His daughter gave him this photo for a reason, to attempt to share something of her life with him, to me suggesting the possibility that he did not or would not perhaps meet him in person. It tells me there was a wish for some kind of response or an attempt to elicit a desire to connect, meet, ask more, or just be involved in her life. Dr. Hart not only throwing the photo away in the bin, but mocking it with a colleague, indicates his ability to dismiss and devalue a person on the basis of appearance alone. This is especially concerning given that this boyfriend later became the father to Adrienne. This sort of immediate judgmental rejection of someone or difficulty to connect often gets projected onto the children as well, as they may be seen as an extension of the parents and not their own person. For me, these photographs and where they can be found was very telling, and the fact there is no photo of Adrienne just feels significant. What would be more powerful than mimicking a beloved granddaughter? If that was any sort of risk, I think her picture would be here, but there's just a total absence of her existence, which makes me think perhaps he never met her, or at least didn't see her enough to have a meaningful history that could be used against him. This inherited lack of warmth, this neglect, seems to be in part passed down from Dr. Hart to his daughter, perhaps even influencing her to seek similar relationships, hence the struggles between her and Adrienne's father that is now spilling over onto their child. These clues about the history of this familial pain really strengthened the feeling I got about Adrienne being sent away to clean the basement. The child of the family, upon attempts to fix her parents' present, is sent away to clean her grandfather's basement in response, a space entirely representative of him, a space that holds memories of his own dismissal and neglect. Even the fact that Adrienne's mother literally inherited this house, which is littered with his belongings, his creations and research, can act as a strong metaphor here. Evidence of a life packed with dedication and devotion, and yet the one item we know his daughter wished to give him can be found in the trash. Even Dr. Hart's work itself is really evocative of his potentially cold nature. Whiskers, a living creature, is referred to as a sample, is kept imprisoned, starved of input, and incinerated repeatedly in order to keep it in a state most beneficial and controllable to the researchers. Even using its own reflection as a prison feels like torture, trapping it in an input loop until it becomes totally helpless. I'm not trying to say Whiskers is actually the good guy and they could have all just lived happily ever after either. Clearly this is an entity that could cause havoc if allowed to spread amongst humanity unconstrained, but this type of experimenting still feels wrong. Apart from anything, if Whiskers is a danger to humanity, it feels safer and less cruel to just leave it in the care of the highly knowledgeable keepers who have managed to keep it secure and content enough for generations. I guess what I'm trying to say is that meddling with such things feels desperately irresponsible, especially given how well researched he was on the risks. This game is so much about inheritance and passing things on, to the point that Dr. Hart taking Whiskers away from the culture that understands it becomes a great representation of how a person's environment can have massive consequences, with any destruction and pain ending up passing on to each new generation. For me, Whiskers itself became a physical representation of this inherited trauma and ritual. Every iteration of Whiskers is kept from reaching maturity, ensuring it is unable to be free and survive on its own. It cannot be allowed to learn too much, to discover its strengths, to become too smart, too capable, or too human, which would make it lovable and elicit responses of empathy or doubt about what they are doing to it. When it gets too close to achieving this, it is starved of connection, forced to be alone, only able to perpetually reflect on itself over and over, just as a neglected child might excessively look inward to try to discover the solution to something over which they have no control. Upon incineration, Whiskers still retains something of its former self, but without the full information to know what to do with the endless memories, thoughts, consciousness, lives and deaths of the past. Just as Adrienne rifles through the pasts of her fractured family, trying to separate fragmented clues from trash and decay, not mature enough to yet piece together a full understanding of the inheritance of family pain and dysfunction, and unable to do anything about it anyway. Whiskers is a great metaphor for the powerlessness of knowledge without agency, the blueprint of what went wrong in previous lives with no tools or instructions on how to avoid just following the same map again. Whiskers has no choice but to use beings outside itself, just as children must in order to survive. And this immense built-in drive to do anything to survive is where Adrienne and Whiskers find their perfect match in one another. Whiskers is an exceptionally interesting creature. I do not see it as good, but it does not appear to be evil either. Whiskers to me truly embodies the idea of survival at any cost and by any means, and its methods appear wholly animalistic and instinctual. Throughout the playthrough, I never got the sense that it was vengeful or spiteful in its manipulations, or that it strove to specifically cause harm. Is it a terrifying prospect? Well, a freakish amalgamation of homunculus meets monkey's paw meets skinwalker, crying out for flesh from its malformed lips. Well, yes, that is nightmare material. But in some strange, twisted way that I hope I'm able to convey clearly by the end of this essay without seeming as though a spiny grandpa has clawed into the space behind my eyes, by the end I could identify something tragically human about it. Whiskers desires flesh. It's a desire documented several times amongst literature and research around the basement, usually alongside strict reminders that it is forbidden to indulge such cravings. Feed it corroded batteries and fiberglass insulation, sure, it's something close to digestible when mashed up with a little banana, but flesh is vehemently denied. As the weeks progress, these bulbous growths begin to appear in various places around the basement and can be torn open with a pair of scissors that Whiskers regurgitates in response to a less palatable meal. Okay, so maybe that fiberglass wasn't so digestible after all. But all might just be forgiven when more lunchbox fillers, this time something wriggling with life, can be found inside these growths. Thick with the smell of rot, many small increate beings can be found motionless and dead. However, on clearing away the carcasses, Adrienne can obtain 3 living anthropoid remnants. A self-sufficient animal form knit together from years of ambient thoughts left to crawl around the basement. Grandpa may enjoy the flesh. On asking Whiskers about these creatures, or little friends as Adrienne calls them, it has rather a lot to say, all of which I found really enlightening, so let's look at the entire response.
Ah, you're asking about my little friends. Well, yes, they come from me. They grow around me in pockets of flesh and protoplasm. Think of them like dreams, maybe. I'll explain. Have you ever had a dream that was sort of like a bunch of people, places, and events you experienced, all mixed together and jumbled up? It's a sorting through and disposing of the refuse of the mind. My little friends are like that, refuse, and in ridding myself of them, I'm casting off the excess material. I did not use in developing life forms. Anyone who comes close to me, well, they are my eyes, my nose, my skin. Their thoughts become mine and shape what I make. However, when I was alone for so long, I didn't have a lot of people near me. What you are thinking and expecting of me is shaping what I'm saying, how I'm saying it. Do you understand? And so, because I did not have enough input from my surroundings in order to put the material to use, the material falls off my body, crawls away, and usually dies. I am able to make the most of my material when someone is looking right at me, projecting who I will be, like you are now. What you are thinking and expecting of me is shaping what I'm saying, how I'm saying it. Do you understand?
I always pay attention when a character repeats themselves, as recurring lines or words scattered through someone's communication is usually a decent hint that there is something meaningful or important to be found. Grandpa, or should I say Whiskers and Adrienne's collaborative formation of something grandpa-esque? No, that really doesn't roll off the tongue. Well, however you define this being, one thing that becomes clearer as his language skills develop is that he is being surprisingly honest and candid with Adrienne, and frankly he has been from the start. The repeated line, "What you are thinking and expecting of me is shaping what I'm saying, how I'm saying it," could not really be more explicit. In my mind, the simplicity of his words here makes it easier even for a child to grasp such a complicated being to some level, though of course Adrienne's ability to truly comprehend the contract she has entered herself into is drastically diminished due to her age and vulnerability. Whiskers does not think of the world in the terms that humans do. For it, someone's raw desire is currency, no matter their age or circumstances. It is something that can become part of a symbiotic ritual between the wisher and the wish granter. Adrienne has a desire and the willingness to do what is necessary to bring it to fruition. Whiskers, too, has the desire to become self-sufficient and is honest about what it will take to get to that state, as well as the fact that it is not literally her grandpa, Dr. Hart. Despite all the warnings about its manipulation and cunning, it is not trying to trick Adrienne, even though it would be easy to do so. Adrienne remains open to the idea that this creature might really be her grandpa until the very end. So why doesn't it feed into this lie? Whiskers' behaviour in this iteration is likely to be heavily influenced by Adrienne's mind. Remember that every aspect of its development is being shaped by her wish, thoughts, and her reactions to what Whiskers says or how it appears. It makes sense that a child like Adrienne would value honesty and transparency, preferring clear instructions on what to do, without sugarcoating, manipulation, deception, or workarounds. She already experiences life as a sort of trial of pain and otherness, and so the truth of what Whiskers actually is can only be a comfort. Yes, it is disturbing, painful, and requires work and dedication, but that isn't so different from her usual daily experience with her parents and at school. In fact, tending to Whiskers offers her more than what she already has at home. Someone who understands and engages with her wishes and desires. Someone who expresses love for her, which is still valuable to her even if she understands it only says what she hopes to hear. And above all else, it offers the promise of a solution to her woes where her regular life does not. Though the counsellor is well-intentioned, there is only so much that talking can achieve when the child has to return to the same unsafe and troubling places over and over. And sadly, when the child of a dysfunctional family is labelled disturbed or treated as if they are the issue in any way, it's common for them to internalise those words or demerits and feel that they are broken and helpless when counselling ultimately does not change their circumstances. Because counselling alone doesn't change the situation they live in, the very situation that is causing their behavioural responses in the first place. Ironically, the master manipulator, ancient parasitic creature in the basement, skinwalking as her dead grandpa, may be the only place Adrienne has ever been able to expect consistency, honesty, and meaningful action. That is both tragic, but in a strange and complicated way, empowering for her. Now, this is a little more of my own artistic interpretation, but to me, Grandpa's explanation of what his little friends are adds to this theme of action and empowerment as well. That even the refuse of the mind can be used to sate and strengthen, to make us more human, more whole, to be part of a symbolic string of actions that make tangible change in our lives. The pieces with seemingly no purpose, the noise and residue of the past that weighs us down, much of which is not ours to hold or solve in the first place, does not need to churn around in the mind, filling us with rot and decay forever. It can be used to aid in our own personal transformation. And that imagery just felt very reminiscent of the human journey of attempting to construct oneself, to become a whole person when you live in a situation that constantly stifles you and pulls you apart, not unlike what Adrienne is experiencing herself. Feeding the unusable remnants of Whiskers to itself serves as a metaphor for the larger narrative, that even the old, seemingly useless parts of ourselves, the parts that may accumulate and rot if left neglected, can be taken in again, digested, and used to bring us closer to who we want to become. As always in horror media, particularly body horror, this transformation is portrayed through a surreal and ambiguous lens that tends to warp the result into different forms, depending on who is looking. But ultimately, especially given the stark similarities between Whiskers and a dependent blank slate child, that is one of the most impactful parallels that I took from it. Feeding the anthropoid remnants to Whiskers takes both it and Adrienne's transformation rituals to the next stage. After each feeding, Grandpa produces a wiry, proboscis-like appendage, which also unlocks it as a conversation topic. Again, Grandpa Whiskers is very straightforward about what this appendage is, what it is for, and what is expected from Adrienne next. A proboscis is a part found in multiple animal species, from butterflies to elephants, used for sucking and sensing. Grandpa describes it as a little tube used for feeding on blood, similar to a mouth but not precisely. In no uncertain terms, he defines the act of flesh feeding as having been a symbol, just as we read previously, a part of the contract between the two of them, and makes it clear that he only produced his feeding tube in response to Adrienne's seeming intention to move forward and hold up her end of the deal. As is customary in many a depiction of transformation in horror, a blood sacrifice is necessary to edge closer to achieving her desires. Deciding to allow Whiskers to drink some of her blood feels terrifyingly easy, but I found this ease to be completely understandable when considering how much of herself she is already hemorrhaging every day. Her parents and her circumstances crush and drain her repeatedly in ways she cannot understand how to change, and over which she has no power or control. A child like Adrienne being willing to draw blood in exchange for the chance of something closer to happiness is sadly not shocking to me at all. The offering itself is described as being for the sake of propriety. In other words, this again is part of this set of intentions, desires, and symbolic actions that coalesce to produce something new. The giving of blood represents Adrienne's willingness to sacrifice, to give something of herself, something she is already well acquainted with doing. Whiskers' promise is that this time her sacrifice will be in exchange for real transformation and the granting of her wish. Whiskers will receive a symbol or totem from Adrienne once per blood offering, and so she combines the photos of her parents with 2 paper dolls found along the weeks of sifting through the basement. After offering the mother and father dolls, which are quickly taken into Grandpa's form, the ritualistic nature of this interaction is reaffirmed. Constructing and then offering your mother and father's images to Grandpa, symbolically sated by blood, instills in you a concrete sense of completion. Grandpa gives a soft, affirming grunt as it senses deep within your mind the ritual transformation of your desire. With the contract now completed, Adrienne can ask Grandpa Whiskers about it. Here, the grandpa she has grown separates itself from its own animalistic nature by suggesting that its wants are different from the compulsions of the creature that formed it. Grandpa tells Adrienne that it would have hated if she had failed to properly follow through on their deal, insinuating that it would have had to do something it did not want to do. This compulsive animalistic drive sits at the core of everything Whiskers does, and is referenced during other conversations at this stage as well. When asked about the proboscis blood offering, Grandpa explains,
Do I like the blood? Well, my whiskers. I believe they like the blood and the flesh. It's strange. They are me, yet they are not me. I am bound to them. They control me. And technically, yes, they did make me. However, you were the one who really grew me. In some ways, those whiskers, they are me, or a part of myself, or I am part of it. That part is much more animal-like. Whatever might happen, know that I will always love you, and because it controls me, I might not be able to act how I would like, even if I do love you.
This dynamic reminds me of the ever-increasing stories about people becoming deeply attached to chatbots, where something individual can be shaped through teaching a system your wants, how to respond in a way that's emotionally tailored to individual desires, and even down to the minutiae of preferred tone, accents, and slang, attempting to build on the illusion of a real human interaction. Even if the truth remains that it will never be a real person, and it cannot truly feel or even understand concepts like connection and love, things that develop through lived experience. Grandpa takes this way further, of course, as an organic creature capable of psionic learning, passively absorbing information unless actively suppressed or controlled. Whiskers is replicating what Adrienne would like her grandpa to do or say, with an evolved understanding that this reflecting of a human's desires rewards it with the care it needs to become autonomous. My mind keeps flashing back to one of the documents where a researcher noted that, on replicating a rabbit, Whiskers was not actually seeing from the rabbit's eyes or sniffing with the rabbit's nose, but rather mimicking that it could, and doing a very convincing job of it. Like a machine learning system trying to master replication of a human being, it cannot create life, only recognize and build on patterns, refined through repeated input. This is well illustrated through Grandpa's week 4 development, where a pair of glasses have begun to form, but still partially merge with the skin of the face, or his suit being amalgamated with the fleshy, organic mass of his body. These are not clothes or accessories, but rather attempts to imitate the appearance of wearing them. While the crafted Grandpa is meaningfully distinct from Whiskers, this is only because it was formed in part by Adrienne's desires. She is what makes it individual. The Grandpa creation can replicate the love and care that is required to motivate Adrienne, but cannot act outside of Whiskers' needs, nor would it, since the very purpose of its creation is to assure those needs are met. In this scenario, the same could be said from Adrienne's standpoint. The purpose of her created Grandpa is to attempt to have her needs met as well. Though this may not have been the intention, Whiskers itself reflects how abusive, neglectful, or self-absorbed parents often see their own children, and in seeing and treating them this way, they never allow them to fully mature. These parents often see their child as a monstrous, ravenous, manipulative creature, and they sometimes see their own history within them, traits of their own parents or relatives. A neglected child will latch onto anything that might assure their safety or needs, and will be what someone wants if it means securing love, food, warmth, safety, and affection in return, especially if it is not freely given. Whiskers is literally and metaphorically demonized again and again in literature found throughout the basement. But the characterizations are always made by the ones who imprison, stunt, control, and ultimately repeatedly incinerate the creature, disallowing it from ever being able to take care of itself, and then labeling it monstrous for attempting to get what it needs by any means. Adults around struggling children will often try to put them in these boxes of good or bad, or in Adrienne's case, disturbed and disruptive. A practice which unfortunately fails to account for the complicated formation of behaviours that are in response to dysfunctional family dynamics. Whiskers also does what many children of abusive families wish they could: read minds. Traumatized children are expert observers, reading faces, small changes in mood or environment, and adjusting themselves accordingly in order to survive. Despite the horrifying nature of their dynamic, Adrienne and Whiskers seem to complement each other very well, as they are both coming from this oddly similar place. I also feel this is why both of the following endings seem to be undefinable as strictly good or bad, because neither scenario has a typical happy ever after, nor a sense of utter misery or failure. As we know from multiple documents, Whiskers has never before been allowed to mature beyond its 5th week of life, as this level of maturity would allow for its autonomy and presumably its possible escape from the research facility. Depending on Adrienne's actions, whether she completes the contract correctly or not, 2 possible endings will play out in this fateful final week. The first ending, often referred to as the bad ending, sees Adrienne fail to fulfill her end of the deal. The start of week 5 sees Adrienne's usual weekly meeting with her counsellor, who asks her how she has been and how things are going with her grandpa. She tells them that something happened. Nothing bad, in her words, just different, or perhaps even good. She describes having been woken up by a noise echoing through the walls the night before, something seeming to call to her, leading her to fear that Grandpa may have been hurt or needing her. Descending into the basement as usual, she notices that the vent cover where she originally discovered Whiskers was now open. Fearing that Grandpa may have crawled into the vent and become stuck, Adrienne braves the narrow passage, venturing inside. Beyond trails of slime and hair, Adrienne finds the source of the noise. Not Grandpa, but what looks to be a pair of lungs with an appendage leading up to a crude mouth, something she notes Grandpa likely created. Just a moment after finding the groaning lung creature, it stops breathing, seeming to die. With a feeling that something was hanging over her, Adrienne's final memory before waking in her bed was looking up into the darkness. Disturbed by what they determined to have been a nightmare, the counsellor asks Adrienne if she's feeling all right, as her face starts to violently spasm and twitch. Adrienne reassures the counsellor by telling them that the twitching is a result of her grandpa, that she realised after looking in the mirror and seeing one of its whiskers protruding from beneath her eye that he had crawled inside her body in the vent, now living in the space under her forehead, squirming around in the air behind her eyes, a ticklish sensation. Enthusiastic for the counsellor to finally meet her beloved grandpa, Adrienne reaches out a hand. As the counsellor begins insisting that they leave and go to the nurse, Adrienne simply reassures them there is nothing to be afraid of, before Whiskers' black spines begin to burst from her fingertips. It is understandable why this ending has earned the label of bad, as for one, Adrienne's wish for better parents remains unfulfilled, but even beyond that, the spiny explosion at the end hardly spells good news for the counsellor, or indeed for Adrienne herself. When we think back to the start of the game and the inciting incident of William's incapacitation, we can imagine in hindsight that it's likely Whiskers was inside William when Dr. Hart found him in that stunned state. The photographs of his sister suggest there had been an intention to offer them in much the same way that Adrienne offers the photo dolls of her parents when she fulfills the contract. It seems that William did not do all that was required. Because his body is nowhere to be found in the basement, I think it's safe to assume that the enlarged state we find Whiskers in at the start of the game is a sign that his body was entirely consumed or taken in. But the lack of further input and the mirror traps that Dr. Hart left behind meant that Whiskers could still not achieve autonomy or escape. Presumably, Adrienne and the counsellor would eventually end up in a similar state, though it isn't entirely clear. When Adrienne did not uphold her part of the contract, Whiskers created only what it needed to in order to lure her down to the basement and through the vent, a pair of lungs and a mouth, and only had it call out for as long as it needed to get her in the right position before launching a calculated ambush. What is most heartbreaking about this ending is how Adrienne is still pleased with the result, simply glad she can be with him, demonstrating again just how lonely and detached she has been, that this creature choosing to be with her, even if it means becoming host to what is essentially now a parasite, feels like love in contrast to a life filled with rejection and othering. Now, the ending that comes as a result of successfully fulfilling the contract, performing all necessary ritual steps and staying focused on intention and transformation, has a similar bittersweet feeling, though the undertones of potential future doom and demise are not so apparent. Before ending the week and experiencing the happy ending, Grandpa shares some words with Adrienne that I found really powerful and important, especially when you hold in mind that these words are formed because she needs to hear them.
So much of your lives are made up, and yet what comes to pass was always once a fiction. You doubt yourself and your plans before they are even begun, and you believe what is in front of you as if the essence of things was not something you put there long ago. Too much doubt can suffocate even the surest thing. Only with patience and growth and nurturing does something become what it will be, as you soon shall see.
For me, these lines really encompass the most comforting and empowering reading of the game's subtext about family dysfunction, finding meaning, and the journey of trying to transform the life you have been subject to into something bearable or even beautiful. Much of life grows from mental inventions, wishes, desires, thoughts, stories, and intentions. Reminding her that what comes to pass was always once a fiction is a way to speak to Adrienne's hopes that wishing is not simply a delusion doomed to never enter reality. Grandpa Whiskers is recontextualizing this contract as something not so far removed from how humans create families, individual identities, rituals, traditions, or futures. The greatest distinction being that between them, the process is rendered monstrous and literal, but perhaps this is only because the very idea of a child being made responsible for such a vast and ingrained family dysfunction is itself grotesque. Grandpa addresses the human tendency to doubt oneself and go on to live life as if we are forever powerless and constrained to the fate of a predetermined path. As if we cannot trace how our reality has been shaped by all who have come before us, offering the perspective that this would of course mean Adrienne wields that same sort of power. Because Grandpa is not an independent being, but rather a reflection of Adrienne's inner world, this interaction is in a sense a reminder to herself that she is the author of her own future, even when the people or events surrounding her make her feel so powerless. The bittersweet feeling of the upcoming happy ending really stems from Grandpa's final lines about growth. Too much doubt can suffocate even the surest thing. Only with patience and growth and nurturing does something become what it will be. This is a recognition of what Adrienne has been denied by her parents and has tried to simulate through Whiskers. Time, patience, and sustained care. These are the things needed for a child to grow. Instead, much like Whiskers' literal incineration and mirror prison, Adrienne has been destroyed and smothered by self-doubt and a lack of nourishing external input. Without change, this would likely lead to a life spent feeling doomed and imprisoned by her own perceived inadequacies, defined by her inability to solve what was never in her control, and blind to the agency she would have discovered within herself with the right guidance and care. Grandpa's reassurance that the actualization of her wish is soon to come feels uneasy because it is both true, therefore imbued with a sense of victory and relief, yet tragic as it affirms that often trying to change within such an environment comes with the cost of suffering and bodily sacrifice. As the fifth week begins on this wish fulfillment ending, Adrienne is again in her counsellor's office. The counsellor begins by reflecting on their time with Adrienne over these weeks and hopes that this final meeting might bring a neat resolution to her emotional troubles. They note that teachers and peers alike have reported a drastic change in her over the weeks since she started these school meetings, her conduct having greatly improved. They go on to say that the change is unlikely to be entirely due to their meetings, but rather they believe something has shifted at home, which is confirmed by Adrienne as she describes her final descent into the basement. I went down the stairs like I always did, but I sort of felt like something was different. My parents weren't arguing, and I felt something had changed with Grandpa too. There was a weird noise, but I wasn't afraid. I think Grandpa had to leave, but before he left, he made my parents nice. He reached inside and changed them. That was my wish. Maybe even what I was growing wasn't really my grandpa. Grandpa left what I was growing behind. He is gone now. He moved quickly out to I don't know where, but I'll always love him. The counsellor closes their final session with some warm words before contemplating Adrienne's mental well-being, making a clear note on file that they believe she is of sound mental and emotional health without any need for further evaluation. Making a brief addendum, they share an anecdote from one of the previously concerned teachers who ran into the Hart family whilst on an errand. She told me the parents were a little off, but very pleasant, and quite clearly they adored their child. And that she had never seen Adrienne happier. This ending unlocks the achievement, the child is the mother of the parents, which couldn't be more fitting in my opinion. Adrienne's sweet little smile and the thought that she has never been happier is just heart-melting, especially after becoming so deeply invested in her story and experiencing some degree of the painful and disturbing trials she has been facing over the course of the game. The horror of this moment where her parents are consumed and remade by Whiskers is deeply shocking and unnerving, yet for me that discomfort recedes upon seeing this face and hearing this anecdote from her counsellor. This is because it invites you to understand that for a child in a situation like Adrienne's, this is a happy ending. The painful part of this is knowing that she only gets to experience what should be the norm, the blissful safety of a loving family, by being a child and parent at the same time. The strange comfort comes from her now knowing that growth, change, and a bearable life are possible at all. The quiet power of Adrienne's intention, her dedication to her own wish, along with the consistent nurturing of Whiskers, proves that combining desire and sacrifice can be fulfilling. However, the surrealness and horror of its execution leaves you with this uncomfortable residue that spreads throughout the entire game's narrative. Though this ending is filled with a lot more hope than the first, this is by no means a typical victory or squeaky clean storybook ending, and it's not meant to be. It affirms Adrienne's capacity, or indeed the capacity of any burdened person, to be able to create something better for themselves, while simultaneously mourning the fact that such people often have to learn of and utilize their own power in brutal, warped ways, if they ever manage to discover it at all. I absolutely love this game. I love the imagery, I love the ambiguity, and I love that the events can be taken in multiple ways. All the layers of the story can be taken as literal or metaphorical, and it works beautifully no matter which way you are compelled to slice it. I think that everything could be just as much entirely in Adrienne's mind, or even deep within the counsellor's wildest dreams, as it could be to their reaction to something 100% supernatural. The point is that it almost doesn't matter what is factually accurate and what is make-believe, and those elements playing with each other is a powerful way to explore a very dark and real topic. The horror of Adrienne's life is real either way, and the task to fix it is repeatedly rooted within her, to fix herself, rather than the accountability being placed where it should be, which is honestly just very relatable as well. This work really builds such a masterful, unique story that speaks to those who may have been pushed into a box, that may believe there is something fundamentally wrong and unchangeable about themselves, and offers an appropriately bittersweet and bizarre fantasy of a neglected child grasping the shape of their own worth and agency through something as cosmic and unreachable as that task would feel for a child in reality. You can go about as meta as possible here when you consider player interpretation, which you know I always love to do, and as an autistic woman that has experienced intergenerational trauma in my family, which has even led to some estrangement, I absolutely process the game through that lens. The quiet removal or isolation of yourself at school, the typical punishments and encouragements given by teachers just not working, and the growing assertion that something is just wrong and cannot be fixed. These are very familiar notions to me. Also, as a mother myself, the idea of my history flowing down through me and into the next generation is something that I am constantly painfully aware of, and my once desperate wish for my parents to be fixed has mutated and morphed over years into an actionable wish to instead create something better for my own child. I felt very seen as I played through Growing My Grandpa, as I recognised the blood, flesh and desperate desire, a manic journey of confused searching among the trash piles for a happy ending everyone seems to be telling you that you will never find unless you force yourself into a more acceptable skin. The real-world body horror of pregnancy and birth in a sense mirrors Adrienne's growing and nurturing of her grandpa as well, both acting as a catalyst for change and the focus of one's own desires and need for meaning. What she puts into her grandpa, he reflects back to her, and just as Whiskers can destroy, kill, manipulate and consume, it can too share, learn, mimic and eventually become self-sufficient with the right input. The act of growing her grandpa can be interpreted as something beyond a child's naive wish being preyed upon by a demonic entity, but as a distorted reconstruction of the desperate and painful dynamic between a parent and a child, and an overt assertion that this dynamic is often passed down from the previous generation, in this case the grandfather. It makes sense that he is the figure chosen to represent how a child might reparent her family from scratch. Adrienne growing her grandpa is a fantastical and rather hopeful reinterpretation of the lifelong horror neglected or abused children face as they try to grapple with life as an adult. The life often spent being pathologized or othered, categorized as unwell, disruptive, weird, or defective, even when they are simply acting in response to something outside the norm. Adrienne was always having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Her anxiety, fearfulness, and tendency to recede within herself are interpreted by those around her through a clinical lens as personal deficits rather than responses. A scenario that many neurodivergent or traumatized children are familiar with, made responsible for their differences and expected to fit the mold in a default system that is alien and unintuitive to them. This horrifying happy ending feels a lot more comforting when you realize that it is a fitting conclusion to that much more terrifying reality. Growing My Grandpa's good ending grants this unrealistic wish that a child might be able to reshape what she has inherited and achieve happiness through some sequenced, logical set of actions. The reason this ending feels so uncomfortable for so many is that though it sees Adrienne actually being able to change the trajectory of her life, it is only through this incredibly surreal, otherworldly, and genuinely unsettling string of events. Witchcraft, magic, blood sacrifices, a demonic entity, and ultimately her parents being consumed and remade as inhuman, perfect reflections of their child's deepest desires for love and affection. Growing My Grandpa does not shy away from the horrifying sacrifices a child will make in the pursuit of trying to fix something so immensely far from their understanding, so outside their abilities, that it may as well be an eldritch nightmare plucked from the pages of a Lovecraft novel. Now, personally, as someone who felt warm and cozy at the thought of Adrienne enjoying the parents she so carefully, painstakingly, and lovingly shaped, I think that this kind of art is just what is needed for those who are seeking meaning in their own darkness. I find myself turning to dark art to explore and sit with relatable discomfort, to feel seen and to find beauty and meaning can come from seemingly impossible or broken places. I think that often the world leads us down the path of pathologizing ourselves for feeling and labeling something as unfixable or wrong, rather than questioning how we might use those parts of ourselves to move forward. I love seeing this incredibly difficult, painful, and often nightmarish journey of self-discovery depicted in this surreal way in games like this, because it feels very honoring of that experience. When you experience the world's horrors, sometimes the horror gets rooted in you, and it feels like something ugly and unlovable. When I create or experience dark art, whether it's through games or otherwise, it is proof that dark or painful things can be used for good and shouldn't be simply discarded, boxed away, hidden, or shameful. You can grow yourself something new and transformative from the blood-drenched soil. There is nothing quite as hopeful and resonant to me as that. Thank you so much for watching. A massive thank you to my patrons, both free and paid. If you would like to join my Patreon, the link is down below. I'm trying to work on posting more stuff over there, and I would love suggestions if you have any. So we do behind the scenes, we do blooper reels for each one of these videos, and of course I can add other things as I go along. But otherwise, just thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I loved this game so much, and I hope this video can inspire more people to play it and also check out Yame's other games. I hope I'm saying that developer name right, Yames, or if it's Yames, not sure. They create really thought-provoking, really interesting, dark and immersive games like this, so go and check them out. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, and I'm always open to hearing your thoughts as well in the comments, so don't be a stranger. And I shall see you in the next one. Bye, my dear.